Welcome back to another episode of Multifamily AP 360. And today's our guest is Joe Dons from Belrose Storage Group. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, sure, absolutely. A little bit about Joe. Joe is a lifelong entrepreneur with ventures across securities, mortgage, hospitality, and real estate. As co-founder of the Belrose Group, he focuses on niche opportunities in the self-storage sector, leading the firm's growth from acquisitions into development and consulting. Known for spotting niches within niches, Joe dives deep into lesser known industries and eagerly shares his insights. As CEO, Joe embodies servant leadership, fostering a collaborative, innovative culture at Belrose. A Philadelphia native, he now lives just outside the city with his wife, Dina, and their three children. He is passionate about helping others achieve their goals and regularly speaks at the Self Storage Academy and Mastermind as an expert in the field. So, with that, Joe, you want to add anything to your background?
No, that's pretty well covered. I do teach at the academy. I do that is one of my passions, and we help mentor people looking to buy self-storage to get into the space. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Awesome, thank you. So
Mhm.
you have got a knack of excelling in lesser known industries, which is fascinating. How did you first discover your interest in financial securities and real estate, and what motivated you to dive into these fields?
Oh, that's a long answer. I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah.
So out of college, so it was late 90s. I was 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there. Actually didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I always wanted to be in real estate, but never really had a pathway, or at least I didn't realize I did. And a buddy of mine said American Express Financial Advisors is hiring. So we went together and we applied and we got the job. We learned how to become financial advisors. And really, if I'm being honest, we learned how to become glorified insurance sales agents and with a financial planning backgrounds. But a long story short, I was in that business for about 7 years, I think, and I didn't love it. And shortly after 9/11, which again, I didn't lose anybody in 9/11 that I was close with, but it was a defining moment in that the markets closed for a week, and I had time to reflect on what I wanted to do, and I just decided in that moment this wasn't for me anymore, and I left that industry. I had a stopover owning a bar and restaurant because I always bartended. I've always had multiple jobs. I was always an entrepreneur growing up, and always had something working, I guess is the best way to say it. And while I was just in a kind of a stopover holdover job, which I knew was not a long-term gig, I was selling radio, actually, talk radio in Philadelphia. And when two of my clients were real estate advertising clients, one was a mentor that was teaching people how to buy, rehab, and either rent or sell single family homes. And they literally ended up as my client. So this was like perfect because now I'm going to learn about real estate, and that's what I've always wanted to do. And so I did. I went through their program. I think they were selling for $5,000 or something like that. Was their education program, and ended up out on the street looking for properties. And I think probably because I was broke at the time, I think I was wholesaling first. So I was finding properties and wholesaling for 5 grand, and thought that was fantastic. And then we bought a couple houses and rented and flipped some. And then one of my this is all while I was selling radio. And then one of my other clients was a developer, and I got to know him pretty well. And yeah, I didn't go to work for him, but he said, "Hey, I have a buddy that really he's in the 1031 exchange business, didn't know anything about it, but they were buying multifamily buildings and office buildings. And then later I raised money for hotels, but multifamily office hotels. And they were doing them as 1031 exchanges. And so I want to be in real estate. I took the leap, went over there. So now I've got one foot in residential kind of investment real estate and the other foot in commercial real estate. So I started to learn enough to be dangerous. And unfortunately, that industry, with the mortgage meltdown in 2008 and 9, that industry went from in 2006, there was $4 billion of 1031 exchanges in our little niche industry. By 2009, that number was down to 250 million. So it's just like evaporated. So I had to reinvent myself and all over again. So this is like my third or fourth iteration. And that's when I went to a tax lien seminar. I met my partner Tom, who you have interviewed in the past, and we started just hashing out ideas, and we started looking into buying reperforming second mortgages, residential second mortgages. And then that kind of led us to believe that if we're buying them at these high yields, like 25%, 30% yields as reperforming, what must they be when you buy them non-performing, right? What must the yield be? In my head, it had to be 50 to 100%, and sure enough, I was right. So we went and made our way into that business, and we still own that company, U.S. Mortgage Resolution. We buy a ton of residential charged off second mortgages from banks. But even that industry had a period of a couple of years where we couldn't buy the debt because the regulations put on the banks were so onerous that it wasn't worth it to sell. So we had to reinvent again. This is the life of the entrepreneur. And so it was in that time frame that I got an email, I think, because I've been to so many conferences. I'm sure you get a bunch yourself, right? And you end up on email lists. You get all kinds of emails. And I got this email from Scott Myers trying to teach me. It was a marketing email about self-storage. I didn't know the first thing about self-storage. This was probably 2016. When I tell you I knew nothing, I knew nothing. There was all the conferences I went to, there wasn't one self-storage operator that showed up. Not one. And I was at commercial real estate conferences. I've never rented it. Still haven't. I've never rented a unit. I guess I drove by them and noticed them, but never thought anything of them. And I'm Gen X. I'm 51. My generation. I'm not sure where you fall, but my generation does not really rent self storage. It wasn't the tagline. I was just saying that caught my attention. Caught my attention, but that wasn't what sold me on self storage. It was when I read further and coming out of the distressed mortgage space, especially in particular the second mortgages, right? Residential second mortgages. Everyone told us we were insane for even looking into that space and buying and risking every whatever. And we looked at that as well. That's interesting. Why are so many people against this? So I'm a curious person. So I'm not saying I run into burning buildings, but I'm curious as to when the consensus is blue. I'm curious, and it looks black to me. I'm curious why. That's what got us interested in distressed second mortgages, the yields, obviously. But while we were in it, what we realized and still do is it's a completely dislocated, fragmented market. And so as I read this email about self-storage, I got that same feeling again as I was reading. And that feeling was what I was reading that gave me that feeling was, and then it was this line alone. This is at the time, so this is 2016. The numbers have changed slightly, and I'll update them. But the email I got at the time said 80% of all self-storage facilities in the United States are owned by mom and pop investors. 80%. I would have thought, and I admittedly didn't know anything about self-storage, but I recognize the names I see all the time: Public, CubeSmart, Extra Space, Life Storage, right? Those are the big names we see.
Yeah.
I thought they were self-storage. I had no idea that they were the small. It's between 70 and 75% are still owned by mom and pop. What that said to me was dislocation, fragmentation. There's got to be an amazing opportunity and upside here. And sure enough, that's what we found. So what we do is we go after mom and pop. We look for, it sounds weird to say we go after. It is what we do, but it sounds aggressive, and I don't mean to sound that way. We look for win opportunities from mom and pop owned self-storage facilities where they're retiring. Uh, Unfortunately, sometimes somebody dies or somebody gets sick or whatever, but by the way, that's the age bracket that owns them. They're 65 plus, right? The average age of the seller that we buy from is probably 70 and maybe even higher than that. But that's what we look for. We find these facilities that are mom and pop owned and really mom and pop run and managed. I always sound like I'm disparaging them, and I don't mean to because they were the pioneers, right? They're the ones that either built these or bought them 20 years ago and had the vision. But they haven't exactly kept up with technology and what technology can do and help you manage these facilities. So we find that they're just, I say mismanaged, but they're not efficiently managed is a better way to put it than mismanaged. They're just not as efficiently managed as they could be from when you can introduce technology and marketing. Classic examples are the website, if they have one, isn't very functional, and it might be from the MySpace era, right? They don't raise rates. There's a lot of times they tell us they're the lowest rate in town and they're always full. And you really have to manage these closer to a hotel than you do a multifamily, where multifamily, you have an annual lease, right? In a hotel, you have a nightly contract. Storage, our contracts are monthly. So you really do need to manage them, the rates up and down Not that we change them monthly, but and there's the in place versus the street, meaning what the street rate, meaning what you would a move-in rate. But that is what I found fascinating, and I got excited. I got goosebumps because I felt like in real estate, I was seeing the same sort of opportunity that I saw in distressed debt. I try to keep that short. I apologize. But that you asked three questions in one, and
Yeah,
that was my journey into how I got into self-storage.
sure, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
And acquisition play a key role in your work, right? So what factors do you consider when deciding whether or not to pursue particular, acquisition?
Yeah, great question. And I encounter this all the time with students. The first thing they want to do when they learn is how to underwrite the deal. They found a quote unquote deal and they want to get right to the underwriting, meaning of the facility. They want to take the offering memorandum if it's from a broker, or they want to take the P&L and the rent roll and everything if it's off market. And they want to just start getting in and slicing and dicing the deal. And I have to stop them. Say, I don't, it doesn't matter how great this deal is for the most part. There's exceptions, but you typically it doesn't matter how great or what this deal looks like. Do we want to be there? So the very first thing acquisition criteria that we look for is the market. Do I even want to own a facility there? Right? It almost doesn't matter what the numbers say or what I can negotiate unless I'm absolutely stealing it. And I don't plan on being in that market very long. Sure, that's an outlier. When I'm looking at this, I'm looking at being there for 5 years. So I got to know I want to be in that market for 5 years. So what are the things I look for in a market or that I don't want to see in a market? I'm looking for population trends of the growth of the population. So if you look at, for instance, if you looked at a map of where Belrose has acquired their facilities, we've got two in New York and one in Minnesota, but everything else is in the Southeast. It's because we're on the East Coast. It's easier for us to travel down to the Southeast, and that's where the populations from east of the Mississippi, they go southeast. This is not not an aha moment, right? If you're out on the west, everybody goes southwest, right? They head south. So the population trends are important to us. Then from there, it's storage is local. And so we measure our market as a 1, 3, and 5 mile market. And then if you get rural, maybe a 10, 15-minute drive time. What do I want to see in that market? I'm looking for the not only the number of households, but the mix between owners and renters and multifamily. I want to know what the median household income is. I want to know what the poverty rate is, and I want to know what the crime statistics are. And then when I get and also if I'm happy with all that, then I'm going to take a look further at what's the employment sector look like. Is this town, especially the smaller the town, is it heavily relying on one employer? Because if it is, and that employer has any change of anything, how that situation is, people are going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose income, people are going to move away. It's going to be a downward spiral. So that I'm looking at the market first. I have to know if I want to be there. If I want to be there, then I want to see the deal. Because if it's a great market, there's some things you can overcome in the deal, or there's some hair. Every deal has hair. It's a question of is this hair on this deal acceptable or not? And if I can put that in the context of the market, then I can make a pretty good decision about that.
Yeah, we also pretty much look similar kind of macro factors.
Yeah, good.
Thank you very much. Yeah, seeing the investors you work with improve their quality of life must be rewarding, right? So how do you approach understanding the goals and ensuring that their financial security is prioritized in the deals you structure?
Yeah. So for passive investors, so we when we buy a deal for Belrose, we raise money from passive investors. Look, we're not financial advisors, so I don't we don't get too deep into what does your whole financial picture look like. I if you end up in a conversation with me, I can't help it. I was 7 years in it, so it comes out naturally. But typically, we're looking for the accreditation status and liquidity. So as long as you're an accredited investor, for the most part, we do put out deals for non-accredited investors, but for the most part, for accredited investors, that's what we're looking for. If you're certified accredited, you should be okay to be in an illiquid deal for 5 years. For the deals we put out for non-accredited investors, then there's no accreditation status that they have to meet. But what makes me leery for folks like who want to invest in, it's a struggle because for me internally, because I want them to be able to invest in these deals because as someone who was a former financial advisor and was in the stock market, to me it's got a place in your portfolio, but it's a casino. I much prefer to have most of my assets in assets that I can measure, right? Like real estate. So I want people to be able to, who aren't accredited, to be able to invest in real estate like self-storage. So we do put those offerings out, but I don't want them to make mistakes with their liquidity. So what we look for, and I try to guide people to, is, hey, look, if you want to invest 25,000 in one of our deals as a non-accredited investor, that's fine, but show me that you have $50,000 cash outside of that, or a total of 75. I just think you need to have liquid cash. And I've seen it in the past in my distressed debt funds way back in the day. We had a couple of people come to us who were not accredited. They were allowed to be in the deals, but they had a roof go or this happened, and they just didn't have much other cash. So they needed to liquidate that cash, and these are illiquid investments, and it just makes it hard for them, hard for us. So that's what I look for. Hopefully that answered your question. I can't get too deep into somebody's financial situation,
Yeah,
but if you're accredited, you're pretty much fine. If you're not accredited, I'd like to see some liquidity, and it's for your benefit.
yeah, got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So last 2 3 years are like from interest rate point of view, inflation or supply demand issues, right? So
Mhm.
what kind of challenges you guys face in self-storage space?
The last 2 years was very challenging. What the self-storage space maybe got a reminder of, or a greater appreciation of, depending on where you are coming into it, was how important the real estate market is, the residential real estate market is, not from a value standpoint, from a transactional standpoint. Self storage does very well in really good times because everyone's making money and we're buying stuff and then we got to store the stuff, right? And self storage does really well in bad times, believe it or not, because unfortunately people lose their jobs and people move back with their parents if they're younger, or they're moving in together. So dislocation, the 4Ds, the 4Ds, the typical 4Ds that are good for real estate are good for self storage as well. Where we struggled is what happened the last 2 years. Times weren't good, and they weren't terrible, right? But the interest rates went up 400 basis points. Inflation went through the roof. Nobody had any money, but nobody was moving. So the real estate market, the transaction volumes were just through the floor, right? And on top of that, times weren't good. We had this stagnation for 2 years. That was really bad for self storage. And on top of that, it was compounded. If you bought self storage, let's say in 2021 and 2020, or even 2020, 2021 and 2022, 2023 and 2024 were in particular really hard because I'll say we overpaid, but paid what you had to pay in the market. But you pay, storage is interesting. It's probably not unlike multifamily. You buy it based on the trailing 12 months, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's trailing 12 coming out of COVID was through the roof.
yeah,
So you're overpaying for that. And then you're losing the occupancy and the rates that you just overpaid for. So that was what was particularly difficult for the prior 2 years. That said, I will tell you, I'll give you 4 reasons why buying self-storage right now is the single greatest time ever. Number one, everyone's last 2 years were terrible. So the trailing 12s are at a discount. So you're buying storage at a discount at a time where everything is trending back up, right? Two, storage is accessible. If you're just starting out in real estate, or you're trying to graduate from a single family rental portfolio or something like that, it's very accessible. You can buy storage facilities in the 400,000 to $1 million range without even ever competing with Belrose, let alone Public and CubeSmart, right? We don't even compete with them, right? They're way too big for us. So what they buy is too big for us. There's a ton of storage facilities down in that 500, that 400, $500,000 range to a million, million five. That's where most storage facilities, they're owned by, I already covered this, people that are 65 plus years old who are all retiring and getting out of the business, right? And then lastly, it's a business, which means if you buy a multifamily property, you can get a bank loan, but you're maxing out at 75 LTV. Storage, you get to use the SBA because we're a business. It's still real estate, but we're operating a business and they consider multifamily an investment. So we're allowed to use SBA loans or your listeners are allowed to use SBA loans up to 90% financing. So it's even more accessible to get into a storage. So the intersection of this is the best time ever because they're on sale, they're being sold, and they're attainable. And there's the most product out there to buy is in that bandwidth, and you can use SBA loans.
So how do you get SBA loans?
You go to most banks can do them. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend going to there's a handful of banks that specialize in it. Live Oak Bank comes to mind. Bank 59 comes to mind. They specialize in SBA loans. When you go to them, the loan process, while it'll feel a little more onerous than going to a bank, it's not going to take any longer. If you go to a bank that says, sure, we can do an SBA loan for you, but they really don't know how to do them, that could take 6 to 9 months. You don't want that because your deal will have fallen apart by then and you'll have wasted a lot of time and energy. I would highly recommend going to a bank that specializes in SBA loans.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, what trends or opportunities do you see in the commercial real estate market, especially self-storage space, so that you're particularly excited about, and how is Belrose is positioning itself to take advantage of them?
Yeah. Besides everything I just said, which I'm super excited about for not just Belrose, for our value add portfolio that we buy for. And I'm super excited for all the people we mentor and consult with, and we help them get into deals because all the reasons I just said. But there is a third thing we do that I am super excited about, and that is we are developing what we call pro storage facilities. And what they are they're just bigger size units than traditional self storage. So your traditional self storage, or what I always say, the 2 bedroom apartment in self storage is the 10 by 10. All right. 10 by 10, 100 square feet, 8 foot ceiling, roll up door. In pro storage, and we own one of these actually in Wilmington, North Carolina, and this is part of what gave us the idea, that and the intersection of what's happening with e-commerce. And I'll tie it all together for you in a second. In Wilmington, North Carolina, our smallest unit size is 450 square feet. Our largest is around 1,000 square feet. The ceilings aren't 8 feet tall, they're 14 feet tall. They're 12 to 15 feet wide, they're 25 to 40 feet deep. You can drive a truck into it. So if you're a contractor, electrician, plumber, whatever, you can drive your truck into it with ladders on top, whatever. You store your inventory, store your truck overnight, your tools, everything. Those are our customers in Wilmington, North Carolina. We also have customers that have toy cars in there. We call them so this is a B2B facility, or B to high net worth C. This is how we call it, right? So you got the toy cars, and then about 20% of our customers are boat and RV owners because the units are so big, you just drive it right in. So that was exciting for us. It's the best facility we've ever bought. It's the easiest to manage. It's a dream of a facility. And we were humming along with that. And then, long story short, a seed was put in my head about last mile warehouse. And I said, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. We started digging. We've been at this for over a year now, realizing what's going on. And a light bulb went off one day when I was driving my son to school. And he said, Dad, I want to get a pull-up bar. He was in 8th grade. I want to get a pull-up bar for his door, right? And he's into working out and whatever. And I said, we're not getting that because you know what those things do to door jams, right? And how the paint and everything. And I said, there's no way you're getting it. And he just beat me down on the ride to school. I said, he's, Dad, this one doesn't. It doesn't even screw in. Whatever. I said, all right, fine. We'll order it. We'll try it. I got home that night, 6 o'clock. He says, Dad, it works great. It doesn't chip the paint. I said, what are you talking about? I said, the pull-up bar. And in my head, I know what happened here. He got it same day. He ordered it on the way to school. It arrived that afternoon. But in my head, I'm going, how is that possible? It's a pull-up bar. This isn't toilet paper. I mean, I know we can get things same day, next day. I've been ordering stuff, but pull-up bar? This isn't paper towels or dishwashing detergent, stuff you need. It's a pull-up bar. We would have waited a week for that. That means a pull-up bar was being stored somewhere within what, 30, 45 minutes of my house. That was insane to me. And that was the point where I said, there's something to this. So we started really researching last mile warehouse, et cetera. And what we found was, and there's two parts to this. What we found was the Amazons and the Walmarts, the two biggest online retailers, they know if they don't offer something same day, next day, their products, and they have tons of products, but the products they don't offer same day, next day, they're losing 25% of their sales. That's a tremendously huge number. So that's why they're gobbling up all of the already existing warehouse space, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. And we've all seen the million square foot distribution centers going up, right? So if you're close enough to them, that's where it's coming from. Otherwise, in other areas, to get it to you in Greenboro, North Carolina, let's say, they probably have leased various facilities around you, warehouses that you've driven by, you never know what was in them. That means they pushed out the existing tenants who were contractors, business owners. Think of the catering company who's storing glasses and tables and chairs and racks of dishes, right? They're getting pushed out because the rents are doubling and tripling in those places. So we're going out and building more of our Wilmington, North Carolina facilities to house businesses on a month to month. It's just storage. It's not a long-term 3-year, 5-year lease with triple net or anything like that. It's just storage. And there's a tremendous demand for it out there in that space. In fact, you're seeing this demand grow in storage, what we call pro storage, professional storage, as well as small bay flex. The difference being one has offices and bathrooms, the other doesn't. So there's that line in between, and we just take it right up to that line.
Yeah.
But there's a demand for both right now. So that's what I'm super excited about. We're actually bought land, and we're going to start developing in about 30 to 45 days in Greenville, South Carolina. Is our first pro storage facility. And we have another
Awesome.
site in Upper Township. Yeah. So that's what I'm so passionate and excited about, because there's a paradigm shift happening right now in how we consume and where we are buying our goods. And the trend is off the charts, and it's continuing to grow. So there's going to be tremendous demand for this space. And then on top of that, the second part of it, and I don't have the data to prove this yet, but we know it's coming. We believe there's going to be, our tenants will also become on logistics retailers, wholesalers.
Yeah.
Because with everything, with all the onshoring coming back to the United States, more products are going to be manufactured here and distributed here. And I know these things, there's going to be the Joe Downs and the Ramas of the world are going to be buying these products that are manufactured in factories, but nowhere to go until they're sold, and they need to be housed somewhere. I firmly believe they're going to be housed and some of the units will be taken up by these online, let's say, e-retailers or e-wholesalers or whatever they call them. There's a bunch of different names getting kicked around right now. And technology will be involved. So we're building these to be tech enabled. I can see we'll have RFID readers over the doors, and these things have power and climate control and cameras, CCTV inside, as well as we'll have it on the exterior, but you'll be able to see what's going on inside your unit as well. So I think that's the paradigm shift that's happening. I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. And thank you very much. That's great stuff.
Yeah.
And how can listeners can connect with you, Joe?
Yeah, anyone interested in investing in storage, whether it's passively or if you're looking to buy a facility, we'd love to hear from you. My email is the best way to get me. Is Joe at belroseam.com. That's Belrose, BELROSE, A as an asset, M as in management.com. And then our website is belrosestorategroup.com. You can always just register there if you're interested in investing.
Awesome. And thank you very much, Joe. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you so much for having me.
Sure.